At the table where everyone laughed, one woman reached for my hand and somehow, the whole room went silent. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that arrives when someone feels most broken, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope and subscribe to Ancient Truth. The lunch was supposed to be simple. A bright Saturday afternoon at an expensive restaurant overlooking the city, golden sunlight pouring through tall windows, polished glasses shining on white tablecloths, laughter floating over plates of food and expensive perfume. I should have known something was wrong when my friends insisted I dress nicely, when they kept texting me not to be late, when they smiled too hard as I walked in. My name was Callum, and for most of my adult life, I had been the safe joke in every group. The quiet one. The divorced one. The man who always showed up alone, paid his share, laughed when others laughed, and pretended their little comments did not sting. They called it teasing. They said I was too sensitive. They said I needed to learn how to take a joke. But that day, their joke was sitting at the table in a pale pink dress, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, her eyes carrying a pain that did not belong in a room full of laughter. Her name was Marin Vale. I did not know that when I first saw her. All I knew was that she looked like someone who had been placed under a spotlight she never asked for. She sat stiffly at the edge of the chair, her hair softly falling around her face, her lips trying to hold a polite smile while my friends watched me like boys waiting for a prank to explode. Behind me, Nolan covered his mouth to hide his laugh. Brisa pointed toward Marin like she was the punchline. Another friend leaned back with a grin and said they had finally found someone perfect for me because, in his words, I was already good at taking responsibility for other people's mistakes. The table erupted. Forks stopped. A waiter froze near the wine glasses. My face burned so badly I could hardly breathe. For a second, I looked at Marin and expected her to laugh too. Maybe she was part of it. Maybe they had paid her, convinced her, or tricked her into helping them embarrass me. But her eyes filled with tears before mine did. She looked down at her belly, then at the people laughing behind me, and I saw the truth before anyone said it. She had been humiliated too. She was not the joke. She was the target beside me. I wanted to stand up and leave. I wanted to throw my napkin on the table and disappear from that restaurant, from those friends, from the version of myself that kept accepting cruelty because loneliness felt worse. But then Marin slowly reached across the table. Her fingers trembled. She placed her hand over mine, warm and shaking, and she held on like we were both drowning in the same water. The laughter faltered. My friends stopped pointing. The city outside the windows kept glowing, but inside that restaurant, something changed. Her touch did not feel romantic at first. It felt human. It felt like someone saying without words that she would not let me be destroyed alone. I turned toward her, still stunned, and saw tears shining in her eyes. Her dress was soft pink, tied gently above her belly, the kind of dress someone wears when they are trying to look brave on a day they feel anything but. She had dressed nicely because she believed she was coming to meet someone kind. I later learned Nolan had told her I was a widower looking for a serious relationship, someone mature enough to accept a woman with a complicated life. He had told me nothing. He had only said they had a surprise guest and that I should keep an open mind. To them, her pregnancy was the joke. My loneliness was the joke. Our pain was entertainment. Marin did not shout. She did not insult them. She simply tightened her hand around mine, lifted her chin, and looked at every laughing face at that table until their smiles began to rot into shame. In that moment, I saw more courage in her silence than I had seen in all my friends' loud confidence combined. I stood up, not letting go of her hand, and told the waiter we would like another table. Not outside. Not hidden. Just away from them. The waiter nodded quickly, as if he had been waiting for one decent person in the room to act. Marin rose carefully, one hand on her belly, the other still in mine. As we walked away, I heard Nolan mutter that I was being dramatic. For the first time in years, I did not turn back to apologize. The new table was near the window, where sunlight spread across the marble like honey. For a while, neither of us spoke. We sat with untouched water glasses between us and the sound of my old friends fading into the background. Maren wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by her tears. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She gave a small, broken smile and said people had been making her feel sorry for existing ever since she started showing. Her fiancé had left 3 months earlier, not because the baby was not his, but because responsibility had become too heavy for him. Her family loved her but lived far away. Her co-workers treated her like a tragedy. And now strangers had turned her into a joke over lunch. I told her I understood humiliation better than I wanted to admit. My marriage had ended 2 years earlier after my wife walked away with someone from her office. After that, my friends had decided my sadness was something to cure with jokes. At first, I laughed because I did not want to be alone. Then I laughed because I forgot how to ask people to stop hurting me. Maren listened without interrupting, her hand resting around her glass, her face softening with every word. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was performing strength. I felt seen. That afternoon became something neither of us expected. We ordered lunch because leaving felt like letting them win. We talked about ordinary things first, like food, weather, bad movies, and how restaurant chairs were not designed for pregnant women. Then we talked about fear. She admitted she was terrified of raising a child alone. I admitted I was terrified I had become too empty to love anyone, even myself. The city moved outside in daylight, cars gliding past, people rushing with shopping bags, while inside that restaurant 2 strangers began quietly gathering the pieces of themselves from the floor. When we finally left, my friends were gone. Only the memory of their laughter remained, but it no longer had the same power. Maren paused outside the restaurant beneath the bright afternoon sky. She thanked me for not leaving her there. I told her she was the one who saved me first. She laughed through fresh tears, and for the first time that day, the laugh was real. We did not fall in love that afternoon. Real life is not that simple. We exchanged numbers because both of us knew loneliness can be dangerous when it convinces you that cruelty is normal. I checked on her that evening. She replied with a photo of takeout soup and a message saying the baby had finally stopped kicking like an angry little judge. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Over the next few days, our messages became small lights in ordinary hours. She told me about doctor appointments. I told her about the woodworking class I had joined and nearly quit. She sent me voice notes when she could not sleep. I sent her terrible jokes that made her groan. Slowly, gently, something steady grew. But kindness always gets tested. 2 weeks later, Nolan called. He did not apologize. He said everyone thought I had overreacted and that Maren had probably enjoyed the attention. Hearing him say her name like that made something inside me finally harden. I told him friendship without respect was just a slow form of betrayal. Then I ended the call. My hands shook afterward, but I felt lighter. For years, I thought losing people was the worst thing that could happen. That day, I realized keeping the wrong people can cost you more. Maren had her own battles. Some days she was strong, organizing baby clothes and speaking bravely about the future. Other days she called me crying from parking lots because she had seen a father carrying a newborn or because a cashier had asked where her husband was. I never tried to fix every pain with speeches. Sometimes I just listened. Sometimes I brought groceries. Sometimes I sat beside her during appointments when she did not want to face the waiting room alone. People stared, assuming I was the father. At first, I corrected them. Later, I stopped caring what they assumed, because being present mattered more than explaining. One afternoon, after a checkup, the doctor let us hear the baby's heartbeat. It filled the small room like a tiny drum refusing to surrender. Marin cried silently, and without thinking, she reached for my hand again, just like she had in the restaurant. This time there was no laughter behind us. No humiliation. No cruel audience. Only a frightened woman, a wounded man, and a life between them reminding both that the future was still possible. Months passed. The baby grew. So did our trust. I painted a nursery wall in Marin's apartment a pale green because she said pink had started to feel like everyone else's expectation. She sat on a chair with lemonade, laughing at how bad I was with painter's tape. We built a crib badly, took it apart, built it again, and celebrated like we had constructed a palace. Her old fiancé sent one message asking if she was still angry. She stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. She said some doors do not close with a slam. Some close when your heart finally stops waiting beside them. Near the end of her pregnancy, Marin invited me to a small baby shower at her sister's house. I almost did not go because I feared I did not belong. But when I arrived, Marin saw me from across the room and smiled like I was exactly where I should be. Her family welcomed me carefully at first, then warmly, after they watched how she relaxed when I stood near her. Her sister pulled me aside and said Marin had started sleeping better since I came into her life. I did not know what to say. I only looked across the room at Marin, glowing in the daylight, one hand on her belly, and I realized that the day meant to humiliate me had introduced me to the bravest person I had ever known. The birth came during a stormy morning, the kind where rain lashes windows and traffic turns the whole city gray. Marin called me before sunrise, her voice tight with fear. I drove through flooded streets with my heart pounding harder than the thunder. At the hospital, she gripped my hand through every wave of pain. She cursed, cried, prayed, and apologized for squeezing too hard. I told her to break every bone if she needed to. Hours later, when her daughter finally arrived, tiny and furious and alive, Marin looked at me with exhaustion and wonder. The nurse asked who wanted to cut the cord. Marin did not hesitate. She looked at me and nodded. The baby's name was Sienna. She had Marin's mouth and a cry powerful enough to silence the world. When I held her for the first time, I understood that family is not always born from blood. Sometimes it is born from showing up when walking away would be easier. Sometimes it begins at a table where people laugh, and one trembling hand chooses kindness instead of shame. A year later, I returned to that same restaurant with Marin and Sienna. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because memories lose their poison when you bring love back to the place where pain began. It was daytime again, sunlight pouring through the windows, glasses shining, soft music playing. Marin wore a blue dress this time. Sienna sat in a high chair, smashing bread between her fingers like it owed her money. I looked at the table where my old friends had laughed, and I felt no anger. Only distance. They had tried to make me feel small by placing me beside a woman they thought the world had rejected. Instead, they had placed me beside the woman who taught me how large a heart can become after it has been broken. Near the end, Marin reached across the table and took my hand again. She did not have to say anything. Her eyes said enough. They said we had survived the cruel beginning. They said shame had not won. They said love, real love, does not always arrive dressed as a fairy tale. Sometimes it arrives scared, pregnant, humiliated, and brave enough to hold your hand in front of everyone. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth, because stories like this remind us that one act of kindness can change a life forever. Before the ending, comment kindness wins if you believe no person should ever be judged by their hardest season. And years later, whenever Sienna asked how I met her mother, I never told her about the cruelty first. I told her that in a bright restaurant on an ordinary afternoon, her mother took my hand when the whole world seemed to be laughing, and from that moment on, I knew some people do not enter your life to complete a perfect story. They enter to help you rewrite a broken one.